Today we're breaking down and letting you know our thoughts and also what is added to Dune Imperium with all 5 of the expansions that have now been released from Direwolf Studios, Direwolf Games.
Direwolf Digital, I believe
It's
they call them.
one of those categories. This is not digital. I will deny and refute all accusations that they make their best products online. Granted, one of the 5 expansions is actually a digital thing that I think most of you probably aren't aware of. And no, it's not the digital version of this game.
Which is a fantastic app in its own right.
Actually much more compelling and much more expansive in terms of what it adds.
It's an interesting idea that they have there, and it brings a little bit extra to the game, but completely optional at that.
Our goal here is to be quick, be thorough, be concise, let you know what these expansions are adding, why we think they're either worth or not worth getting and bringing into your gameplay experience, depending on how you enjoy your game, and, of course, helping direct you towards what you should invest in depending on where you started. We did a video previously called Don't Buy Both, right? Advocating that both games are wonderful, but the experiences are so different, you should start and know where you're starting between Uprising and Imperium. Here, we're gonna let you know what the next steps towards progress just might be. And Corey, we're gonna start with what you have said is not only your favorite expansion for this game, one of your favorite games of all time, also one of mine now, will be in my top 10 this next year. You also have stated, and I quote,
on camera,
I like turkeys. I think they should be the national bird. I'm glad you affirm that that is the thing. Never verify a quote before it's actually been said out loud. He said that this is the best expansion of all time. I'm going to take a step back. What does Rise of Ix add, and why is it as good as you think it is?
So for me personally, Rise of Ix adds so much more depth and complexity to the game, and it makes those choices just that much more important. You know, the chess matches, I referred to it in previous videos, where that kind of, if I go here, that person may go there, and then this person goes here, and then I can go there, and just trying to think 5, 6, 7 steps ahead, the choices become so much more important, I feel, with every move you make in Rise of Ix.
So it deepens the base game, adds more interesting worker placement locations, and more mechanics into the core structure of your long-term strategy. Let's talk about each one of those parts. Sure. Let's take a look first at the board stuff that it adds, worker placement zones and the overlay tile. And then let's go very quickly through the type of cards it adds, because it also enhances the deck building experience, which is not something you want to overlook if you like deck building as much as I do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So first of all, one of the first things to note as far as board things that come on is the tech track here. So you have these lovely tech tiles. You have added spots that go alongside the board here. So each of these little tech tiles here, these provide you some kind of benefit or extra boost either on your turn or
immediate endgame or conditional, like have this thing, therefore you get that thing.
Exactly.
It depends on if you want to go for endgame scoring or you want to go for a little bit of, not platforming, but a little bit of tableau building.
Sort of, but it also can very easily, mesh with the kind of deck that you're building, overall with, so if you, for example, you have holo projectors, like if you're trying to focus on a strategy to get a lot of cards and buy the Spice Must Flow to give yourself extra points, having something like holo projectors, I can discard a card that's not going to give me any persuasion or any persuasion, and I can draw a card. Maybe it's something that's going to give me extra things, and it's just enough.
Every time I play with Rise of Ix, there is always a tile that I want to get, and I'm always worried that someone else also likely wants to get that tile. And sometimes there's multiple. The market is very strategically deep and not always the same, but that isn't the only reason why people will come to this board.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's also the introduction of the Dreadnoughts, which become permanent units on the board. They do not come off it unless there are some tech tiles and some cards that have an effect that, hey, if you remove a Dreadnought, you get some extra benefit. But for the most part, they stay on the board, and they give you 3 power in combat, which is something that can be extremely powerful.
Enhances the strength a little bit, focuses in both on deck building, on long-term strategy and on the war part of the game, which is areas all where Dune Imperium base game, different communities felt like it was lacking in any one or multiple of those categories. And Rise of X comes in and goes, no, that's just the base game. Let's put some legs under it.
Yeah, and you can make an argument about whether the Dreadnought mechanic of going, of taking over a spot is actually worth it or not. But it's definitely a noticeable improvement on, them trying to figure out a way to make combat better than it was in the original base.
Yeah. Yep. Along with that, we actually change the board itself. Now, if you notice in base game here, there's a lot of green spots. There's, nice two little yellow up there in the corner. The green spots are all usually single use-ish during the course of a game, whether or not you're buying a seat in the High Council, whether you're getting your swordsman, and they're all fairly expensive, which means they're limited to go to. This reduces the number of those. Add some green over here onto this other tableau board. What are the important changes that are happening to the game here, and how does it change your play?
So I think the biggest one is this shipping track here over on the right side here. So first of all, it adds a spot that requires 2 influence with the Spacing Guild, which makes it even more important. But the whole idea with the shipping track is I've got ways of accumulating a huge bonus turn
when I want to
I want to trigger something.
Or something quick and immediate, but I'm missing out on a longer, greater effect.
Yeah, so the ability to get money is still there, just as before, but it's also the ability I can quickly build up my troops in my garrison.
Yeah.
I can get extra influence on a spot, and if I have a tech tile that I want, but I don't have the spice for it, getting to the top there and getting that discount can be very helpful, especially for some of the higher cost tech tiles.
Yeah, instead of wasting some turns going to get spice specifically, you might spend some turns moving up this track and get other things that are more advantageous to your play while still being able to buy at a discount. How do the green spaces throw this off? How do they shift the game with the reduction of some of them up there?
So the ones that are removed, the Hall of Oratory, which would get you a troop and an influence, is kind of been replaced by tech negotiation, essentially. You still got the extra influence, but this is going to give you something else that kind of forces you then to have some kind of interaction with the tech tiles. The other one, Rally Troops, is kind of expensive, in games that I've played with it, not really often used. I mean, it can be powerful, but not really very used, and they kind of replaced that with the idea of the Dreadnought, where instead of it being costing 4, but I'm still gaining something entirely beneficial and something that's going to stay on the board for the entire rest of the game.
Yeah.
Rather than something that might be only transitory and leave in a round or two.
Yeah. So you're not missing out. They're not removing anything. They're actually enhancing functionality and giving you more varied ways to play and experience. Let's talk about the cards very, very quickly. I'm going to let you talk while I just filter through them so people that are watching at home can get a sense if they haven't seen these expansions before. What are we seeing in these decks that are added into the game? How do they change the play style? How do they change the deck building experience?
So first of all, you have the entire unload mechanic here, which you can see on that card, which is that I get a benefit not just from actions that I get during not just benefits from my reveal turn, but also stuff that I can get if I'm forced to discard a card. If I force myself to trash that card, you get additional benefits for that as well. Additionally, direct interactions with other spots on the board, especially with the aforementioned shipping track. There are ways of getting Dreadnoughts here, but also I feel the bottom items here, something like this, for example, where it more directly interacts with, you can have reveal items that more directly interact with factions, with other spots, with how much influence you have with specific factions.
Yeah, so the strategy of not only what you're playing, but what you're holding, not just for market value, but also for impact on game, is increased. I find that if I'm playing with Rise of X, I am more likely to actually take less advantageous worker placement actions for the sake of maintaining the hand of cards that I have, because the play is more powerful than the spot that I could go to.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And when we look at some of the intrigue cards that are added in, anything significant here with these, or are they mostly interacting with the state of the game as a whole?
They are, but there's also the introduction here of these cards that interact with both in multiple different types of cards. You can have plot cards that also have combat at the bottom, plot cards that have endgame bonuses. There's, combat cards that may have endgame bonuses. So it rewards you for potentially thinking long-term with the card, but also if you're like, I can get myself an extra point if I use this card, you still have that option to do so.
Yeah.
And you can still cycle through.
Which also encourages holding cards in hand and increases the value of stealing cards from other players, because it could be a victory point. And in a game as tight as Dune Imperium, one victory point could be the difference between your win and your loss.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so this enhances the mind games that are happening kind of behind the scenes. And the final thing we have is a few of the leaders that get added in here from Rise of Ix.
You have a bunch of really cool leaders, including the only 4-star basically one that's difficult. You've got an array of new leaders with all kinds of different powers here that add more complexity to the game, add different strategies that you can use to implement during the game.
We have 2 videos either that have came out or are coming out on the leaders between all of the expansions and our highs and lows in them. Go watch those if you want our nuanced take on our strategic take on how leaders play. My advice around leaders when it comes to any of the expansions across the board is, leaders are going to be leaders. They're going to add something interesting to play, and I can't really tell you to pick one expansion over another because my favorites come from a different one than yours, and I'm sure that's true for how other people play the game as well.
Absolutely.
Leaders, you should either pause this video or look specifically at it. When it comes to Rise of Ix, and then we'll move on to Immortality next.
Immortality.
You say this is your favorite expansion, almost really ever. This is also one that you always include?
I will always include this.
Even with the first teach?
Even with the first teach. I feel like the things that it adds, the complexity that it kind of adds, it does add the complexity and add something new for experienced players, but I don't think it's too overburdensome for somebody to learn the extra shipping track, and they can see then they can see this wonderful game at its best, really, with seeing the track, seeing more of the interactions, getting to understand kind of that chess match, that trying to figure out moves and plan ahead, really.
So if you're buying, if you own or are buying Dune Imperium base game, not Uprising, your advice is buy it with Rise of Ix. Period. Just start from zero right there.
Absolutely.
I'll actually agree with that advice. I think that's sound advice. I don't know. I think for the first, if it's a group of all new players, I don't know that you need to add in Ix.
No.
But if you have at least one experienced player at the table who can guide other players' actions and give them some long-term strategic advice.
And make sure they don't go to spots they're not allowed to, Jesse?
I think it only enhances the game. If you have Uprising, do we feel like Rise of Ix adds or creates enough value for itself when it comes to, because Uprising already has some more combat focus. It already has some more depth of long-term play with the spy mechanics. Like, I don't think I grab Rise of Ix for Uprising.
No, I mean it does have rules for doing so, but I'm not usually tempted when I'm playing Uprising to grab the Rise of Ix. I don't think it really meshes well. I don't think it syncs up well with some of the added things that are in Uprising.
And it is just more stuff. Eventually someone who loves this game like we do will own it. I'm not telling people not to go pick it up, but I don't think I run out and grab it. I don't think it's going to change the game experience, where some of these will a little bit more. Let's talk about Immortality, which is the next expansion on our list. Dune Immortality.
Right, so Immortality adds a few things here. So first of all, a brand new research station here, and that's going to interact with this lovely Tleilaxu board, the Bene Tleilax,
so for those changes to the research station. The cost is still going to be the same, but instead of a 3-card draw, you're going to be getting a science boost.
Yes, so in the game, you're going to have one of your markers over here, and every time you do that marker, that kind of research symbol, you're going to move along this track and gain whatever benefits you want. Either this scarab, which is just basically moving along on this track, that could give you extra points,
potentially.
More faction abilities for you to gain influence with and kind of interact with. Your trashing of cards, and then further along, you have these genetic markers, which we'll get into more when we talk about the cards that are here. And then again, also these green cubes that we'll talk about more when we talk about the cards, because these are also fun to interact with. but it's just an added dimension of something that you need to pay attention to because it can give you tremendous rewards throughout the game.
It's just a little progress track. It's a little squabbling track, adds a different place for you to aim your focus, and I find all players interact with this and are rewarded for doing so when Immortality is added into a game session. Everyone just by happenstance keeps glancing over at where their little chit is, at the victory points that are public and open, and they're all kind of racing and struggling to get there. What are the other main elements that get added in to Dune Imperium?
So with Immortality, you're gaining especially an entirely different card market. So the aforementioned green cubes that you get, which are just your regular supply cubes, basically, that you use also for troops and whatnot. But you also now have an entirely different market that you can spend some of those cubes on for cards that are that can be incredibly powerful here. It can give you extra turns, and also especially have the graft keyword that's brand new for this expansion, where grafting allows you to essentially play 2 cards on your turn. You get the Ancient box for both of them in whatever order you want, but also you get the icons of both. So if you have a couple cards in your hand and you know what spot you want to go to, but you need the benefit for one of those cards, just combine them together, graft it, and then play both.
As a deck building enthusiast, I love the introduction of a secondary market. I like a way that changes my deck building play when I dive into the game. I have to decide if I want to get one card from here, overcommit and grab a few of them. How I customize my deck can be shaped by these powerful cards. My only complaint is actually that this deck often feels a little shallow to me. I always kind of want more. And so that's not a bad complaint. I just want them to create more content of the game I love. So
yeah, and especially there can be some games where, because you're only having a few of these cards out rather than the full 5 as the Imperium row usually has, you can also sometimes get locked into all 1 cost or all 2 costs, and you're kind of like, I want the higher ones. I want the 4 cost ones. I want the ones that are really going to give me a huge boost for this game.
Yeah, and you're in a position to buy it, but you keep having to spend the limited resources that you have on the cheaper cards. What else are we adding in to the core? Do we have more cards that get added in, or is it just this marketplace?
We do, in fact. So we have a bunch of more cards that get added to the Imperium row, some of which utilize also that lovely graft mechanic as well, but also some that, first of all, like Occupation over here, adds the idea that I can play a card, and even if I don't go to a space that is a combat space that would normally let me deploy troops to the conflict, I actually can play this card, and it doesn't matter where I go, I'm going to deploy troops. I get to deploy troops anyway. And then there will also be some of those cards that have it in the bottom as well to be able to deploy those to the conflict on your reveal turn as well, which is fantastic. Plus, you also get some of these cards that interact again with the Tleilaxu board, where if you've gone to certain spots on that board, you're going to get immense benefits. So, like, for example, Tleilaxu Master here, if you've gone to this 4th spot here on that track, you get to immediately acquire a card that costs 6 or less, which can be incredibly powerful, especially if it's mid-game. A card that's going to cost 6 is going to be able to give you a lot of stuff. Or this one here, where if you've already made it to the end of the track, so it's later in the game, it's just directly put that into your hand immediately.
These cards are strategically more deep. I think the complexity of Immortality is slightly higher than the other expansions. It's not just adding to the base game, it's actually changing the way you play. Your path towards victory can be different with Immortality in, whereas the other ones, I think your path towards victory is still fairly the same. I have played games of Dune with Immortality included, where my focus was more on this track than any other element of the game. I don't know that I won. I know I at least was in the conversation. I know I at least was competitive. Anything else that really gets added in here? There's no leaders that are added in.
No leaders.
So that,
no leaders.
They didn't want to add demigods for you to play as.
Some new intrigue cards that kind of interact with the board. Can give you more cubes to buy for stuff. And like this one, which I love because you can have the ability to just for free get 6 power in the conflict.
Still some of the multi-use cards.
You get some of the multi-use cards, and it's fantastic. And I mean, this whole expansion, especially as someone who has read, who's read through the books, like this isn't just going like the base game goes through the first book. The Tleilaxu board and some of those cards really, can bring up stuff from the second book, which nobody really ends up talking about, which I find absolutely fantastic.
If you heard a door slam behind you, by the way, we are approaching our game night here at the Quackalope studio, trying to get this video in before too many people show up. So that's the sound of one of the players. Oh, it's Mayor. That's the sound of one of our friends who's been on the camera before, who happens to lose just all the time, showing up, getting ready to be defeated at whatever game we're playing. We might be playing base.
He brought alcohol.
Oh, okay, never mind. I like the guy
we love
quite
him.
a lot.
We
Glad
love
he
Mayor.
showed up. Let's talk
Indeed.
about the newest one. Let's talk about Bloodlines. So go ahead and grab that rulebook, show it to the camera so they can see the beautiful graphics, and I will pull the components over. Bloodlines is the only expansion to have released. Oh, let me finish the conversation on Immortality.
Sure.
Talking about base game Dune, talking about enhanced Dune with Uprising. Do we think Immortality is a must-buy? When do you add it into your collection? In my opinion, Immortality is the one expansion between the 3 core expansions, 5 total, 3 core. Immortality is the one expansion that I think adds about equally to both. I like it in both games. I like the way it changes the deck. I like the introduction of the additional market, and I think, again, it varies the win condition. It varies the way that you're playing.
I would agree with that.
But I don't think I need it in either.
No, I think it's not necessarily a requirement. I think if you've played the game a few times, especially with Rise of Ix, and you've decided that you really like the game and you want kind of more of you want more of the same experience and some kind of differentiation and more complexity, then I think Immortality is absolutely a fantastic buy.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I would feel is absolutely required. If you're happy enough with just Rise of Ix, then just keep Rise of Ix.
Yeah, I think
fine.
It's the after I've played 10 times type of expansion, after my group is committed type of expansion, but it's not one that I pick up and try to introduce quickly, and it rejuvenates the game, and then creates a nice back and forth of including it and not including it. It's not a permanent mix-in, like you said, Rise of Ix is.
Yeah.
Bloodlines. Bloodlines is the first to come out after Uprising came into existence. It technically fits both. I think there's a strong argument to be made that it is more designed for Uprising than it is designed for base game Imperium, and we'll discuss why that is and what we think here in just a moment. Let's talk about what this adds. So the first thing you're going to see is a introduction of a mechanic that's very similar to what we saw in Rise of Ix. This is a little marketplace that instead of having airships and stuff, destroyers, dreadnoughts, whatever they're called, that you're recruiting into the battlefield, instead you're actually going to be able to purchase a tech tile whenever you go to a green location. So multiple times throughout the course of play, hiring a swordsman, going to get some bonuses, getting a seat on the High Council, just make sure you have the spice on hand and you'll get a little bonus.
Oh yeah.
That being said, you found the tech tiles to not be as intriguing, and I think I would have to agree. They're more supplementary in terms of their mechanics than they are essential or critical towards everyone's playstyle.
Yeah, Rise of Ix, the tech tiles in Rise of Ix are just fantastic and can really help you and really interact extremely well with the deck that you're building, with kind of that strategy you're trying to attempt in gameplay. I just felt so many times with playing with the tech tiles here in Bloodlines that it seemed similar to a tile in Rise of Ix, but I would rather have had the Rise of Ix tile rather than
I've had multiple game sessions where everyone across the board had the opportunity to buy, looked at it, and went, which doesn't really happen in Rise of Ix. Rise of Ix, if you have a chance to buy, you're struggling to get that tile before someone else.
Absolutely.
But it is nice to have this included here, and it is nice to have them recognize that the tech tile is a module that is worth considering. We also have the addition of our
Sadakar Commanders.
Sadakar Commanders. These are little meeples, little models that you can hire. They're going to be spread across 6 different locations on the board, I believe.
In a 4-player game, yes.
6 different locations on the board in a 4-player game, with 1 to the side, because you could hire a total of potential 7 in a 4-player game, as long as you find the right card or the right tile in order to include him. When you purchase one of these, you have to spend 2 Solari and go to that location. It doesn't take away the benefit, it just adds a extra thing on top of it.
Optional thing.
When you purchase one, you also get one of these very ugly, in my opinion, tiles.
Yeah, they are misshapen.
These tiles will all trigger together when you engage in a combat with one of your commanders involved. Now, what that means is that I could have something that on a reveal turn gives me an extra cube. I have something that, if I have a certain amount of influence, gives me more power in a battle, that reacts to other players. Like if they have a sandworm in it, makes me a little bit stronger. If I have 4 of those, and I have 1 Sadakar Commander in the actual battle, I feel like I said that name wrong, but I'm going to keep going forward confidently, I trigger all 4 of those at the same time. Now, to rehire and re-recruit, I don't have to go back to a location. I don't have to revisit a spot on the board.
Well, the spot on the board that you originally hired the guy from, you don't need to go to that.
He instead comes back to my arsenal, and I have to have a viable option to recruit and pay 2 Solari to pull him back out into the conflict. And he can be a bonus above the other 2 cubes that I'm putting out. So I could potentially stick out, 2 cubes plus him for an additional 2 Solari. So it makes you a little bit more powerful, allows you to add troops to conflict a little bit quicker, and creates this little timeline or little, it's not platforming, this
added
programming,
bonus,
this programming sequential thing that'll give you rewards if you've invested in it. Thoughts? It feels again like Rise of Ix adjacent. They're trying to mess with combat.
I understand what they're trying to do, and especially in a thematic perspective, I enjoy the idea of having Sadakar Commanders that you can hire. I just felt like it didn't really add too much for me in the game for Uprising. Some of these abilities, like this Desperate one, for example, is I trash it, I get 3 daggers. Like, it's okay, but there's plenty of intrigue cards, for example, that would give me more power than that.
So go digging for intrigue.
Yeah, so I'd rather go digging for intrigue. Also, I tend to spend my money more. I'm saving up to get my Swordmaster. I'm going to the High Council. Like, I didn't really feel like, and especially with the Sandworm mechanic, I didn't really feel like the Sadakar Commanders were necessarily required for me to have a shot at the game.
If I'm going combat heavy, I'm likely focused in Uprising on Sandworms, not on new commanders or any other units, by the way. I'm not even focused on card bonuses on the bottom of, I like extra daggers, but that's not going to beat someone who's Sandworm heavy. So you gotta kind of mix and match. I found that typically one person in a larger game, 3 or 4 players, will go for these guys. They'll get all of the bonuses, and I haven't found it to be an overly effective way for them to actually be more competitive in the combat. So some of the tiles, gain extra things for things like reveal turn gain spice, or reveal turn gain influence, I found those to be a more compelling strategic option, and I would have maybe preferred this had they done one of 2 things. Either enhanced these tiles with more bonuses that revolved around a wider start of the game, kind of like an early investment, as opposed to daggers, give me actual resources for them being out there, or make it so that they return, pop on and off. Because with only 6 in a 4-player game out there in the market, I'm going to be limited by how many of these tiles I can get anyway. So the bonus of triggering 3, 4, 5 of them is highly unlikely and a big investment to be disappointed by.
Agreed.
So we're mixed on this. It's probably not something that I would typically include. I am more compelled by the introduction of these guys to base game Dune than I am Dune Uprising, because base game Dune has less of a combat focus, which means a few points here and there could actually swing it more significantly.
Yeah, I definitely would like to try that at some point.
Let's
see how it goes.
Filter through the new leaders that we get. Some of my favorite leaders and some of the more complex leaders in the game so far are coming from the Bloodlines expansion.
Yep.
I'm picking up a copy, I would argue, largely for some of the leaders in here. So what are we seeing with these leaders?
With the actual good leaders here, because we had the video where we talked about some that are not so great. These really kind of can help interact with some of the special mechanics here in Uprising versus the regular game, with spies and whatnot. But then you've also got, for example, the Steersman here, who has his own deck of cards that can add bonuses.
He creates forward aiming programming on the board. We have a deck of unique intrigue cards that one of the leaders have.
Yeah,
we have your own contracts that one of the commanders have. We have, along with that, a individual worker placement zone that gets introduced. And so these commanders, these leaders here, start merging your asymmetric abilities with other systems in the game, core systems. I've got more intrigue cards than anyone else, and mine are different. And that creates a really unique way to play for both people who are playing against you and for yourself.
Absolutely.
And then the final thing, or the final things from this, are going to be the brand new cards. So we're still going to see a lot of these multi-use cards here, and I didn't really notice, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't picked up on a overarching positive theme. You know, there's some good combat compared to Uprising. I think there's a little bit more combat in the deck that's introduced here.
Agreed.
And a little bit more this or that type of abilities as opposed to save towards end or get immediate. There's sometimes things where you're choosing between this number of resources or that number of resources, which is nice. But this feels very standard. And then the deck specifically, anything that stands out when it comes to the deck. I don't know if this exists in the base game. I found that character to be very intriguing, but anything that you've seen here.
I mean, this one introduces the command keyword here, which gives you added bonuses if you happen to have a lot of persuasion here. There's also the addition of deep cover spies, which is kind of an okay mechanic where you can put your spy in a location that already has a different player's spy on it. Which can be kind of cool. It also uses something that Immortality introduced as well, with the ability of, in a reveal, I can actually put some more of my troops out there.
Yeah, see, I'm telling you, it's game night. That's a knock at the door. We've got another person showing up. We will be wrapping this video up as soon as possible. I don't know if I've seen this in other expansions, so I am going to go ahead and mention it because it's a very intriguing and interesting card. I could be wrong that it might actually be included other places, but this card specifically is giving you worker placement locations tied to the different type of contracts you have, which for me is a different way to utilize that same idea of the spy icon, and merges very well with, again, another core system in the game. It feels like, for me, Bloodlines sewed a lot of stuff together. That's sort of my thought. So when it comes to Bloodlines, what are you thinking? What would you advise people to do? Are they picking it up immediately? Are they picking it up with Uprising? Is there anything you're going to merge backwards?
I mean, I'm intrigued to kind of test out and see how the Sadakar Commanders would play with the original base of Dune Imperium. As far as purchasing it, I wouldn't say necessarily that it's required at all. I think if you really enjoy Uprising and you want more, you can feel free to get it, but I don't think it's something that's necessarily required. I think you can be perfectly happy with just the regular Uprising.
So whereas I advise Rise of Ix for both games like 10 to 15 games in, I think Bloodlines, I'd say, add it to Uprising about 5 to 6 games in. It enhances the game. It gives you more depth. Once you've learned to play and you know you're enjoying it, I think it's a good way to just bring some extra value in. When it comes to putting it backwards, I don't know that it's necessary at all until you've already picked up both Immortality and Rise of Ix for the core game. And then I think you're going to pick and choose between what you're choosing to add in, whether it's just some of the leader modules, whether it's a few of the cards if you're doing a deck building system, or specifically the Sadakar Commanders, if you happen to find them compelling and you want to both have your airships included and another way for people to get extra combat power, because that could be a compelling mix. Talk about the app, and then we'll get to the 5th expansion. Or do we want to do
the app is the...
The app's the 5th one. Okay, so the 4th expansion is actually...
It's technically Uprising.
It's actually Uprising itself, which for some of you really it will be an expansion. You have brand new leaders that you could introduce. You have a entire stack of cards that you could mix in. You have new intrigue cards that, again, could be merged. And I didn't actually pull them out, but you have a new combat deck, which relates to scoring and matching pairs together to score victory points, and also has a higher emphasis on higher value, more costly, more rewarding combat towards the end stage of the game. I don't need to flip through all of these. The way that you would integrate Uprising backwards into Dune Imperium is by going through and picking and choosing what style of card, what style of play, and what card systems don't interact with mechanics like sandworms that are exclusive to Dune Uprising itself. Do you think this is a reasonable thing for someone to do? I know I'm going to do it. One of the videos I'm going to do within the next month, and one of the games I'm going to probably play at game night, will be a session where I've went through and customized my own version of Dune Imperium. I like that idea. I like that they've opened the floor for people. Is it something that you think is worth even considering for most people out there?
As far as the mixing and matching,
as far as taking anything from Uprising and bringing it back into the core, like you love the core.
I love the core, but
the core is where you play. But are you thinking about bringing those combat cards backwards because they're a little bit more compelling? They add a different way to score, a little bit more emphasis. Are you thinking about bringing any of the cards from Uprising that add lower cost cards into the marketplace, giving you a few extra cards to explore through and a few more interactions with the leadership? Is there anything that you think you're going to bring backwards into your game?
For me personally, no, though I do respect those people who are going to try and mix and match like what you described. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that kind of player typically, where, especially with a game that I love that I always want to get to the table, I want that experience that I know and that I love every time, and I don't necessarily want to kind of mix it. I'm more than happy to play if somebody else is going to try it out, but I don't feel confident in myself that I could really pull that off, and I'd rather just enjoy the game for what it is.
Okay. All right. I think in some ways I disagree with you.
Of course.
But only because I actually like the fact that they're giving me a lot of ways to customize my own version of the game. But I don't think it's necessary to purchase right away. I think Uprising is likely one of those things you get 20 plays into one of the core games. It goes either direction. If you have Uprising, buy base game 20 games in. If you have base game, buy Uprising 20 games in.
Absolutely.
Fifth expansion. We've got an app that I had no idea existed. I bet most people, leave a comment down below and be honest, Mayor. Leave a comment down below and be honest. Did you know there was a app that only is designed to enhance your play experience?
Yeah, so they released last year, I believe, the actual app for Dune Imperium, on Android as well as on Steam, where you can actually play the game. Have
iPhone as well,
opponents.
I believe.
I would imagine so as well. Yes, I have an Android, so I don't really care about what the iPhone people do.
I have made a mistake filming with you.
It's okay. Nobody's perfect, Jesse. No, so a number of years ago, though, Direwolf Digital actually introduced a companion app for Dune Imperium that they've been regularly updating here, that can help you streamline solo games, can help you streamline two-player games of Dune Imperium. They've also added support for Uprising as well. They don't have support for Bloodlines yet. Obviously,
it'll be there
Bloodlines,
soon, I'm sure.
I'm assuming it will, but you can customize which expansions you're playing with. So you have, again, the solo game, the two-player game. It'll help you out with those.
It'll run the solo game. It'll help do the drafting and the card draw and the reshuffle and everything, which is very nice. In a two-player game, just like the solo game, instead of running two side factions in the solo game, you run one side faction in a two-player game. So again, it's creating a supportive, less management for the statistics of the game, the paperwork of the game, which allows you to play easier and quicker.
Yep.
But it also adds.
There's also two other modes.
And this is the thing I think is going to be really cool. I'm so excited about these modes.
Oh yeah, there's Arakeen Scouts and there's Blitz, both of which just add, different things that you can, interact with the app during the game. So sometimes it can give you, different. You can help randomize who's first player. It can also tell you exactly. Something that might end up happening. So, like for example, here, there's subcommittees. Like there's nothing in the rule book at all for called subcommittees, but these are essentially like, hey, when you get a high council seat, you're going to get one of these things for free. And so there's that kind of interaction. There can also be events that happen that interact with the players, and it gives just a little bit more.
You're adding story, and you're adding another layer of choice to each unique gameplay of Dune. And I'm a thematic player. I'm a story-driven player. I love this. And I love the fact that it's an app. I know some of you hate using your phones or hate having digital in any of your board games, but an app means they can continue enhancing it, they can continue adding to it, and they can break it in fun ways and then reset it in fun ways. Like it can just be this grand experiment of crazy, weird storytelling. So for diehards, it just totally makes sense. Does this cost money? Does this cost money for anyone?
It is completely free.
So this is the first expansion you should get, period.
Oh yeah, this is easily, something that you can get, just download and try and enhance the experience. And if you like it, then maybe you're more encouraged to buy some.
Purchase an iPad and have it permanently set up in your game box. I get for every digital game, I get one iPad just to store in the game box so that I don't forget that it exists.
That seems a wise purchase.
It's good, yeah, it's reasonable. We've got a lot of debt.
That is fun, isn't it?
So, with that being said, we've now covered all 5 expansions for Dune Imperium very quickly, because these guys are literally waiting on the sidelines to come actually play a game, which is what they came here to do. Mayor's yawning in the background. He knows he's going to lose, though. He's actually panicking. His heart's aflutter. I see tears streaming down his face.
He wants to be on camera.
He does. He actually likes being on camera. He's a little arrogant. Either way, go ahead and work through your buying order of all these things, and then I'll work through mine. You don't need to go into detail as to why, but just say, if I were getting this, and then this.
So as far as the order for me, I think it's pretty much the order in which it's come out. I think actually Rise of Ix, Immortality.
So base game Dune with Rise of Ix
immediately.
How many plays in for Immortality?
I'd say about somewhere between 5 to 10.
5 to 10 plays for Immortality. Then you're going Uprising or you're going Bloodlines?
Uprising.
Going to Uprising next. How many plays in?
Maybe another 5 to 10 if you're really enjoying it and you want some kind of new experience.
So 10 to 20 plays in, Uprising gets introduced, then Bloodlines after that?
If you want. I mean, I'm not sure I necessarily consider it required, but
Bloodlines isn't even necessarily on the docket right now.
I mean, I enjoy playing it. Especially the leader I played with last time with Piter de Vries, who had his own intrigue deck.
Sure.
I think it was fun, but the tactiles for me just felt too almost not as good as it felt not as good as Rise of Ix. And then the Sadakar Commanders, I kind of wanted more out of them, as you mentioned earlier. And so it's like, sure, maybe I can find a way to keep the leaders in and on my own game, but do what I feel for somebody else that it's necessarily required to have those just for the extra leaders? Not really.
Sure. And then after that, you're gonna close out with the app?
Yep.
Or app comes immediately?
Oh, for me, I love playing the apps on my phone, and then I can come into game night and beat all of you.
Okay. So for me, my buying order is going to be, if you're starting with base game Dune Imperium, we disagree as to which one we like the most, but I'm actually going to go base game Dune Imperium, and then the second purchase, base game Dune Imperium with Rise of Ix. I'm going to join you there.
Yep.
Then the second purchase for me, about 10 to 15 gameplays in, is Uprising before Immortality. The reason being is because Immortality is going to enhance both games, and once you've learned the base game system for Dune Imperium, the transition over to Uprising is going to be a little bit easier. And so Immortality is going to enhance the knowledge and experience you have after you've played both between 10 to 15 times, right? Immortality then comes in, enhances both games, rejuvenates that base game that you've already played, and creates something a little bit different from what you've already experienced in Uprising. It kind of changes the script a little bit, gives you different victory conditions and different ways to orient yourself. And then finally, Bloodlines, I think, is going to be at the tail end alongside you. I don't even think I'd highly recommend it if you already own Uprising as a early buy. I think it enhances both games, but I think it's going to be very selective in what it does. And I think that makes sense for the for what the expansion is doing. It's trying to merge the gap between the two, base games. It's trying to be sold to everyone that owns a copy. So it's repairing stuff in Uprising, and it's trying to still be relevant at all to base game Imperium. And I don't know that it does a good job at both. I don't know that it's a necessary job for either. And then, the app, you should start off early with that. If you're playing solo, it's a great way to learn and kind of get up and running. It simplifies and makes things a little bit easier. And the actual board game app that exists out there in the market, good way to practice and still lose to Mayor when you come over and play.
Like that happens.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I know this video went on way longer than I wanted it to, but we enjoy the conversation, and I personally actually like making people stand on the sidelines. I don't even know who our second guest is.
I think it's Baruch.
It's Baruch. Good.
It is.
He's a very compassionate, very kind, very patient gentleman who never really voices a discontent with almost anything.
Certainly not after the fight that one time.
He is he's actually so patient and respectful that he's stayed in the cold hallway where our shoes get taken off, worried that stepping even into the room where Mayor is will disrupt the course of the video. So
That could also have something to do with the restraining order.
that's true. There's a lot of complexity in our game group. Multiple alcoholics, Reddit, and it's nice to get together and support each other sometimes. What'd you bring to drink, Mayor? You can speak. I mean, he brought the Angel's Envy. Great. This is going to be a good night. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. We're going to go play a board game.
And drink
Remember
bourbon.
to do the important thing. If you have a game night on Tuesday and your wife happens to be free, go watch the baby and let her beat the guys at Dune. That's actually what I'm doing. I'm not going to go play a board. I get to play board games all the time. So Shira's going to come over and she's going to win for the Andersons.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see you next time. Bye.